Hi, my name is Stephen Lamar, and today I will be discussing the effects of technology on children and adolescents. When I was younger, my parents could never seem to keep me in the house. I was always outside running around the neighborhood with all my friends playing sports or riding bikes or anything of that sort. Today's generation has been changed by technologies like video games and the internet. More and more kids would rather spend hours and hours playing Call of Duty or surfing the internet than going outside to play with their friends. My first point, and probably the most important issue, is obesity. Today's youth waste hours upon hours learning unhealthy eating practices from advertisements for unhealthy food, increased snacking behavior while sitting in front of their TV screens. And in addition to obesity, I will discuss two other issues that are attributed to the media. Drinking and smoking are one, and sexual risk-taking is the other. My next point is about the issue of increasing violence from video games and the desensitizing of violence from television and movies. My final point will cover older media versus newer media and how newer media in higher doses can be harmful to adolescent development. In addition to that, I will conclude with how parental supervision is the key to the prevention of everything I will be discussing. My goal is to shed light on the issue and to persuade you that these unhealthy habits are detrimental to our society, and without proper supervision from parents, these issues will continue to grow. My research includes a number of credible researchers from Princeton University, Kansas State, the University of Pennsylvania, Linfield College, and Washington State University. First, I'm going to talk about how media exposure contributes to increased chance of obesity, drinking and smoking, and sexual risk-taking. Researchers Anderson and Escobar Chavez from Princeton University hypothesized that the link between obesity and the media in children and adolescents is a result of young people's decreased metabolic rates while watching TV or playing a video game, their decreased physical activity as a result of spending time in front of a screen, and their increased caloric intake either because they eat while they're watching TV or because they eat in response to food advertisements on TV. According to a study by John Murray of Kansas State University, all of the following are ways media contributes to obesity: increased sedentary activity and displacement of more physical pursuits, unhealthy eating practices learned from both programming and the advertisements of unhealthy foods, increased snacking while viewing, and interference with normal sleep patterns. If you see here, we got a chubby kid eating chips while watching television, and that's just the perfect example of snacking while eating, and it's just not healthy. As you can tell, that kid's probably about 7 years old and a good 190, 200 pounds. Another risk that is attributed to media is cigarette and marijuana smoking among adolescents. It is one of the 10 greatest U.S. government health issues. The media brings billions of impersonations of glamorized smoking to millions of youths through TV, movies, video games, music, the internet, and advertisement in general. As you can see here, you have Lil Wayne smoking a marijuana cigarette, and that's just glamorized by all the people who listen to his music, and it's all in his lyrics and everything like that. And children and adolescents are listening to this music. It's very popular today. On to my next point. The next risk that media presents is alcohol advertising. It is found everywhere in sporting events and broadcast media, and is also present on the internet. Each year, the alcohol industry spends more than $1 billion on television, radio, print, and outdoor advertising. It affects school performance and induces high-risk behaviors. Alcohol plays an important role in 3 leading causes of death among youth: unintentional injuries, including motor vehicle fatalities and drowning, suicides, and homicides. As you see here, you have Pit Bull and Bud Light, and people also attribute, oh, Pit Bull and Bud Light, so we should drink Bud Light and listen to Pit Bull. The last risk that the media influence are sexual risks. Data introduced by researchers at Princeton University from the 2005 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System indicate that 6.2% of high school students engage in sex before the age of 13. Early sexual initiation has been associated with increased risk of sexually transmitted infections and teen pregnancy. To summarize what I just talked about, obesity and risky behaviors like drinking and smoking and sexual risk-taking is all correlated with the media. Increased exposure can affect any child or adolescent. It is important to understand how technology contributes to these behaviors, because these are huge issues in our society today. Now that I have talked about some risky behaviors associated with media exposure, I am next going to talk about media violence and how the effects on children and adolescents are both real and strong. Researchers from Princeton and Kansas State University have done thorough studies that look at how violence is attributed to technology. I am going to discuss how media violence has real and strong effects on America's youth, and too much exposure can lead to increased chance in violence. The following 3 factors are what researchers say lead to increased violence. Aggression. Viewing televised violence can lead to increases in aggressive behavior and or changes in attitude and values, favoring the use of aggression to solve conflicts. Desensitization. Extensive violence viewing may lead to decreased sensitivity to violence and a greater willingness to tolerate increasing levels of violence in society. Fear. Extensive exposure to media violence may produce the mean world syndrome effect, in which viewers overestimate their risk of victimization. Anderson and Escobar Chavez of Princeton University noted in their research that youth violence resulting in death and injuries has direct and indirect costs in excess of $158 billion each year. According to the American Psychological Association, which speaks on behalf of more than 300,000 psychologists in North America, recommends that American society should teach media literacy to children so they have the ability to critically evaluate interactive media, encourage the entertainment industry to link violent behaviors with negative social consequences, develop and disseminate a content-based rating system that accurately reflects the content of video games and interactive media, and encourage developers of violent video games and interactive media to address the issues that playing these video games may increase aggressive thoughts and behaviors in children and adolescents, and that these effects may potentially be greater than the effects of exposure to violent television or movies. As you can see here, there's an Xbox controller with blood splatter all over it, and that being is there's so many different violent video games out there today that kids at the earliest ages of 6 or 7 are allowed to play, and it's all just desensitizing them to the real world, and that's a major issue today. Violence in media is a major issue in today's society. I just discussed how the media increases violence, and I have also talked about how it can be prevented. Both are important to understand, and this issue should never be taken lightly. Lastly, I will talk about the differences in older media and the newer media. More importantly, I will talk about how how the role parents must play in preventing too much media exposure for their children. I will talk about how the older media versus the newer media research has found that newer media in higher doses is more harmful to adolescent development. In addition to that, I will conclude how parents must properly supervise their children's exposure to media in order to keep them safe from all the possible dangers. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania interviewed a nationally representative panel of youth ages 14 to 24 years old, twice, 1 year apart, to determine time spent with television, the internet, video games, and book reading, as well as the purpose of those used. A cluster analysis identified combinations of media use. Regression models tested hypotheses regarding changes in grades, participation in clubs and sports, and symptoms of depression. Results from this experiment found moderate use of the internet was positively related to participation in both clubs and sports. Heavy use of the internet and video games was associated with an increase in depression. Increased depression also predicted greater use of these media, as well as a withdrawal from sports and clubs. Past research indicates that one important moderator of the effects of media exposure on children is parental mediation of media. Restrictive mediation refers to the rules about the content and amount of viewing. Co-viewing occurs when an adult watches television and movies with the children. And active mediation refers to discussions about media content. Correlational research done by Linder and Werner from Linfield College and the University of Washington focused on parental mediation and found benefits of active mediation. Parental active mediation of violent television was negatively associated with aggressive attitudes and behavior in a sample of children in grades 2 to 6. Parental mediation showed perceptions about violent media. Parental mediation showed its influence on reduced aggression by modifying children's perceptions about the violent media they saw. Active mediation of violent media content was negatively associated with children's perceived importance of violent television. Pediatricians should continue to counsel parents to limit total non-educational screen time to no more than 2 hours per day. Avoid putting TV sets and internet connections in a child's bedrooms. To co-view with their children. To limit nighttime screen media use to improve children's sleep. And try to strongly avoid screen exposure for infants under the age of 2 years. Increased exposure to newer media technologies can lead to physical and psychological issues in children and adolescents. Proper supervision from parents is key to the prevention of a wide variety of issues in today's youth. I discussed this with you last because parental guidance is the most important factor, and parents should understand this and take the necessary precautions. In conclusion, today I have introduced you to the effects that media and technology have on children and adolescents. The effects are real, and if not properly attended to, children are at high risk of obesity, drug and alcohol use, sexual experimentation, and violence. Parents are the most important factor in preventing all the negative effects in the media that the media can have on children. They must actively mediate their kids, their media exposure, and encourage them to do other activities instead of sitting in front of the TV screen all day. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Have a good day.